Hi and welcome to another video in Python programming. In the previous video we talked about dictionaries. In this video we will talk about functions. Think of yourself that you want to create a certain code or a set of tasks that you want to use at one point in your program, but later on in the code you would like to kind of perform the same set of operations, the same tasks, and then maybe later on do it kind of over and over again. And you don't want to really be typing the same set of commands each time you want to do them. This is actually what functions are created for. So you can define your function once, or a block of code in the function in your code, and then call that set of commands with that function each time you need it. First of all, let's think of this situation where you have, say, the xy plane, and you want to compute the distance between any two given ordered pairs in the xy plane. So here's the scenario. In the xy plane, you have, again, 2 points, say one here and one here. You'd like to find the distance between the 2 points. So let's say the first point has an ordered pair of x1, y1, and the second point has coordinates of x2, y2. And again, you would like to find the distance between these 2 points. The distance is from here to here, say d equals, here's the formula, the square root, and then you take the x2 minus x1 squared, and then plus y2 minus y squared. So you may want to write down this formula if you're not familiar with it, because we're going to need it as we define our function in a few seconds. Let's turn on to Python to do that, and start with the function that computes, again, the distance between two given ordered pairs. Now let's define our function here. First we use def line here, or define, and then you give the name of the function. Let's say dist for distance between 2 points, and then you put the parameters that you need to do. So we have two ordered pairs, so x1 comma y1, that's the first point, and then x2 y2. So this is the point, and then a colon at the end. So this is the starting line. Hit enter, there's automatically indentation. Again, that's required, just like the if statements, the for loops, and so on, as we explained in the previous videos. So here is, again, you're telling the Python, you're starting your function here, the definition, and then the name of the function, and then the arguments in parentheses, colon at the end, and then we start defining our code. So now we put our formula, d equals the distance formula. So here it is. First, let's look at this quantity here. That's x2 minus x1 to the power 2. That's the exponentiation notation here in Python. And then plus y2 minus y1 squared. That's obviously d squared, not just d. So we need to put this under square root. So raise this to the power 1/2, 0.5. And we've got our formula. At the end, we need to add a return statement. It's not required, but if you want to return a value that you can use for the rest of your program, you can do that. So return d, and now let's run the code and see what we get. It ran nicely, but we don't see any output here because we've defined the function but we haven't called it, and that's why we don't see any output. Let's say you want to find the distance between two ordered pairs 1, 3, 4, -2. So we have to call this function here distance, or dist parentheses, and then as it is given here. Notice once you put dist here and then parentheses, it will show you the arguments that unit is expecting you to put in. So, 4 arguments. So you just wanted to emphasize that. Alright, now let's run the program. And again, it didn't print out anything. It returned the value d, but it'll be nice to be able to print it now. So let's say print dist and then the command, or you can give it a variable name. Let's say you define it as some other letter, and then you print that variable. But now it prints the distance between these two given points. Now, a couple of things with functions. First of all, the number of arguments is important in this case. So if you put, say, an extra argument here, it will throw an error. So run, it will show you distance takes exactly 4 arguments, 5 are given. So the same thing, if you take 1 out, it will also produce an error with a similar explanation. You need 4 arguments and only 3 were given. So we need to make sure to match the number of arguments that are provided. So one more thing we could do with functions is, what if, let's say, you want to compute the distance between 2 points, let's say in the xy plane, and you want to do the distance between any 2 given points if a second point is given. But if no second point is present, then compute the distance to the origin. Let's say here you're on the xy plane, and let's say if you're given 2 points, then find the distance between 2 points, but you're given only 1 point, automatically find the point from that distance to the origin, to the point 0, 0. So more like you want to have a default case. Instead of keep typing 0, 0, if you happen to find yourself that in some cases you are finding distance between 2 points, but in a lot of cases you're doing with the point 0, 0. So you want to set some defaults. You can easily do that. Let's say here you want to set the second point to be 0, 0. So you can put x2 equals 0, y2 equals 0. So here you're telling the Python interpreter that if values of x2 and y2 are given, use whatever given values. If they're not given, use 0, 0. So let's say here, let's say 1, 3 has the same order pair we had before. And if you run this line here, you will notice it will not produce an error because, again, it's taking the first x1, y1, so that's 1, 3. We didn't write x2, y2, automatically stick as 0, the default values. So you can define defaults this way, and it gives you the distance from the point 1, 3 to the origin. One more thing we can do with functions in Python, you can actually explicitly define the variable. So you can say x1 equals 1, and then y1 equals 3. So it will run as expected. Same answer, same output as before. So if you happen to explicitly define, then order is not important. It doesn't matter which one you put first. So you can put y1 first, comma x1, because you're really telling Python which one is x1, which one is y1. If you're not putting the name of the variable, then make sure to use the correct order. So the first number you put is going to be x1, second is y1, and so on. So you can add here, let's say y2 equals, let's say -5. It will also run with no problems because, again, it's taking, now y2, you're giving it some value, so it's taking that value to be -5, and x2 is taken as 0. So now you're finding the distance between the point 1, 3, and then 0 for x2, -5 for y2. So what would happen if I, let's say, put y2 here with -5? It's basically the same quantities here. I just want to change this y1 and then put 3. I just changed the order to show you that it will give you the exact same output here with no difference because, again, you're explicitly putting the name of the variable. Now let's say the only thing you want from your code is to, or your function, to print the distance between the 2 points and nothing else you want to do with this distance. You don't really necessarily need the return statement. You can add a print d here and that's it. So without a return statement. So let's run the code here, and you'll notice that, yeah, let's not include this print statement here. Remove this. We don't need that. Now run the code, and it shows the output that we are expecting. But again, notice that if you don't really include that, so I'm putting a hash here for as a comment, so it's not going to read this as a line of code. If I run here, we will not get any output because you're telling it to print d. D has not been assigned anything because you didn't call the function, right? So we need to call the function first, and then the d value will be populated, then we can print d. The next thing I want to explain about function is the number of arguments here that you need to put. There are cases where you want to keep this open, so to make the function accept any number of arguments. So let me consider another example here. Clear all this here. I'll start with a simple function of adding 2 numbers. Let's call it add, and then let's say x comma y, and define total to be x plus y. Then we're going to print total, and last thing is to call the function. Let's say add 2 comma 7, and let's run the code. And it shows that the sum is 9 right here. Let me clear everything here so you can see it better. Run the code again, and again the sum is 9. The point of bringing this basic example is to show the possibility of having arbitrary number of arguments. You don't have to have 2 arguments. What if number of arguments is not known beforehand and you want to leave it open? So you add here star args, so that's number of arguments. Notice immediately produce like a sign here, a triangle, code analysis, undefined name variable y, because we kind of removed the y from here, so y is not defined anymore. So what we want to do is here add or make a for loop to add over this many arguments. We don't know how many they are, so we need a for loop to kind of keep iterating and adding all these arguments. So first I'd like to define total to be x, and then I want to do a for loop for y in args for any variable included in this list of variables here. So total and plus equal, that's the same thing as saying equals total plus y, and write the argument. So we start with total equaling x, then total equals whatever is in total plus this extra argument y. Keep iterating or in this for loop until you finish all the arguments. At the end, print total. So let's run the code and see what we get here. We get 9, 2, 7, and again now it will accept any set of variables. Let's say 12, 34, comma 7, and then you run the code. It gives you 62, the sum of these 5 numbers. So this way we're allowing, which is pretty cool, kind of, you know, allowing again undefined number of parameters. There's yet one more thing I want to explain here about functions, and so let me go back to our basic function here, x, y, and just do the total equals x plus y here, and I'm going to remove everything else. Just the basic of adding two functions. They're easier to see, and get rid of all the extra variables. Run the code, just making sure, prints out 9, everything looks nice. Let's say for whatever reason you happen to add or define a variable z here, let's say z equal 5, that you introduced that you wanted to use for something else, and at the end here printed total and everything. Let's say you say print z here, and it gives you an error. So printed 9 here, and then as it goes to the next line, print z, it says name z is not defined, and you see the triangle here, it says name z is undefined. Here local variable z is assigned but never used. That's a different thing, just for efficiency. But here it says z is undefined. We haven't defined it yet. Notice now z is defined as a local variable. It does say here local variable z, which means once you conclude your function and move to the next line, all these are kind of thrown away, these local variables, so it will not be accessed by the program outside of the code. I wanted to make sure that you're aware of that. Another scenario, let's say z equal 5 was not defined here. Let's say we define it on top here, z equal 5, and let's say for whatever reason we want to add x plus y, the given, and then let's say we have a fixed z. Of course, that's not the best way to do it. I would do x comma y comma z and put a default value z equal 5 as we explained before. But I just want to explain the idea here. And what would happen if we do, let me keep print z anyways, run the code. Again, let me clear the screen so it's easier to see. So it printed the 2 plus 7 plus 5, that's 14, and then print z, no problem printing the z because it's, again, it's defined outside of the function. So Python would recognize this. The thing here that notice z was listed here, and so the function will search for any z inside of the definition or the function. There's no z involved here, so then this function would recognize, okay, that we're referring to a function that's a global variable, z equal 5, we're going to that, right? So it's going to accept that. For whatever reason, if you define z here, if you want to say z equals, and let's say you want to do z plus total, just as an example here, we're going to get an error. It says local variable z referenced before assignment. This hit me so hard the first time I saw it, so I wanted my students to be aware of that. So how come I already defined my z, and why is it saying local variable? So any instance where you define a variable, if you reference a variable like we did before when we did here plus z, it didn't find any z inside of here, so this was no problem. It went out and took this value of z. But now once you use z here as you're assigning z equal, it's taking this as a local variable. And then you're saying equal z, it's in the mind of this interpreter that this is the local variable z, but wait a minute, z has not been defined locally, and that's why we're getting the error. So we have to be very careful when we deal with variables inside of functions and outside of functions. If you haven't dealt with local and global variables before, and this is your first encounter with these type of things, I know it might be a little too much I'm throwing at you. So bear with me and try it on your own. Try different scenarios. What happens if I define this variable this way, print out, print inside of the function, outside of the function. Try different ways and kind of explore these options so firsthand that you know what to expect as output. A Google search would be helpful if you get stuck. I just wanted to share with you the basics of these issues, and I hope this was helpful. This is the end of our video on the basics of functions. Thanks for watching and see you next time.